right research questions, because you can start doing research and be like, let's just ask people stuff. Cool, we have information, but like, how do we do anything about it? We asked people what their top 5, I think, the most important things about a doctor, and quality was always ranked high. But when we started asking them, what do you mean by quality? The answers were like, oh, a doctor that listens to me. We do research on their market, we do research on their competitors, on their customers, and then we basically build an AI jam or GPT or something like that. That's a really good thing to ask questions and things like that.
This is Between Two Pixels, the podcast for anyone who wants to reach and connect with their audience through content and marketing.
Welcome to this episode of Between Two Pixels, the podcast for anyone looking to reach and connect with their audience through content and marketing. My name's Josh, and I'm joined today by my business partner, Bryan Owen.
Hi, Josh.
Hi, Bryan. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me on our podcast.
You're welcome. You know, it was on the calendar, and I was like, why don't we let's just do it.
It's a great time to talk about
all this stuff. So what have you been up to recently? Just a little icebreaker.
Man. I've been working.
Okay. A
little bit of traveling.
Working hard or
meeting a bunch of good people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Meeting people.
Bunch of new marketing folks that I didn't know before.
You're the extroverted partner.
Yeah. I love that stuff. So I'd rather be out meeting people than sitting at a desk. So
yeah, you recently got to present, I guess, the Global CMO of the Year award, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in Atlanta. That was fun.
That was fun.
Mm-hmm.
Up on stage with all the other CMOs.
Yeah, and there's a picture of me looking all businessy with a suit on.
We're going to continue that trend with your jacket today.
Even more so than this. Got a dress shirt on, not a graphic T-shirt.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. That's what it said. It said business professional was the dress attire, which for a creative, that can mean anything.
Yeah, it's like a straitjacket. It's terrible.
Well, this episode, we're wanting to talk a little bit about market research.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you could kind of unpack a little bit about, because it's a large topic. So when we say market research, it can mean a lot of things.
Yeah.
But how do you want to kind of break this down for this episode?
I think first, in terms of the market, it is a wide ranging topic, and a lot of it depends on the size of the company and the type of budget. So, I think what we'll be talking about mostly is the kind of market research we feel like every brand should be doing. And so like you could do it whether you're $1 million company or less annual revenue, or probably up to maybe 500 million. Because if you get beyond that, you're going to be doing a lot of attribution modeling and data warehousing and analytics and stuff like that is really expensive to do in some cases, although it's getting cheaper. So I think we're going to be focused kind of in that area. The things really, I think, focusing on 3 areas. One is what I'd call like market analysis. So helping understand, if you're getting ready to introduce a new product or going into a new market, to understand the dynamics and their characteristics of a market. So who are the competitors? What's the landscape look like? What are the customers like? All of those kind of things. Yeah. The second would be consumer insights, which is pretty popular. So that's kind of understanding what your consumer needs, what they care about, their value propositions, their baggage, stuff like that. That helps figure out how to position it, the value proposition, messaging, all that kind of stuff in terms of the creative. And then third would be performance. So the side of research that's kind of measuring how well is or how good are our ideas, like how well should they perform, and then looking back and saying like, how well are they actually performing through analytics, websites, stuff like that. So
do you think
those are the
like
most common areas?
Phases? It kind of feels like phases, right? So you kind of have, if you're looking to expand, so some of our clients that might have us do market research as they expand into new areas, but then you have those customer insights, and then there's all the KPIs of tracking. Yeah. So how does that play out over the course of a relationship? Yeah.
So there's going to be some stuff that you're going to be doing on an evergreen basis. So just getting the system in place to track performance on an annual basis or on a regular basis. And then there's going to be stuff that you're going to do when you're starting a new initiative. Obviously, if you're doing something new, you have to understand like, how is this going to resonate and do market testing and stuff like that. So that's going to be like a point in time thing. And then, a lot of that stuff you can build into the cycle anyway. So if you're learning about consumer preferences through, field research, through focus groups, things like, you can keep doing that, which is all good. So you can kind of track changes over time to kind of measure like, Are the preferences of our audience changing, particularly in industries where it's more susceptible to like cultural changes, like in fashion or design, things like that. So there's certainly points in time kind of research, and then stuff that you just kind of put it in and you just kind of build it into the process.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So thinking about that, and let's talk a little bit about our philosophy and then kind of a recommended approach for maybe others that are doing this in an ongoing way.
Yeah, I think, you have to commit to doing it. And it's almost like you have to understand that there is uncertainty in marketing. It is a very inexact science, and it's art and a science, but understanding that you're really, in many cases, trying to either reduce the amount of uncertainty in a situation so that you have data to use, or you're trying to measure and optimize and make sure that what you're doing is working. So I think part of the idea is that you want to use it all the time as much as possible, but it just like how you choose, what type of research you choose to use depends on the situation, the budget, and all that kind of thing. So our philosophy is you should be doing some kind of market research on just about every initiative and as much as possible. It's just a matter of what is the most appropriate depending on how big the investment is, how many unanswered questions we have. So, if you're just tracking your ongoing performance, you want to keep tabs on that. But then if you're launching a new product that has a lot of uncertainty and you don't even know if there's a good product market fit, then that's going to require a much bigger upfront effort. You want to do that before you make some major decisions. So that's kind of part of it is figuring that stuff out. So, and data should never drive. Other philosophies like it's not going to drive the decisions. It's not going to dictate what you do, but every decision should be a little bit better if you actually have data. Now you can choose to be like, well, that's what the data says, but there is some uncertainty in it, and we're actually going to go kind of against this because sometimes like self-reported data is known to be relatively unreliable. Like if you ask somebody, would you purchase this if I offered it at this price? They might say yes, but they wouldn't actually make a purchase, right? So some of it you have to kind of understand that you have to interpret it and make decisions based off that. So
and then you can always take inexpensive test runs on things, right? And then get back real world data, not just survey based, but let's see what actually happens if we roll out a small
a pilot, correct? Yeah,
small pilot.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, we do that on the production side. That, as you know, the team will create multiple versions of things and say, let's roll it out to 10% of the audience. You can do this with email, with advertising, with a lot of things, and then just kind of see the response, especially if there's a way to test. Sometimes even some simple things like a headline change, or in social media, the first 6 or 7 seconds are super important. So you can test those against a smaller audience, and that gives you a whole lot more confidence to be like, okay, now let's go ahead and get it out to everybody and put money behind it. So experimentation and testing and pilots is absolutely something that should be core, I think, with every brand.
Definitely on the content side, it's as much as you think the way an audience is going to respond to something, especially if a brand has never done something like a specific style of social or something like that, or certain campaigns. You might think, oh, if you're reaching a new audience and you're not exactly sure what they're going to react to. Right. It's great to do that. As they say, fire a bullet, not a cannonball.
Yeah. I think that was something you brought up the other day. Yeah.
Well, so what are some of the most useful kind of types of research or approaches?
Yeah. Obviously AI has changed the way research is done, and there's a lot of really practical ways. When you're doing initial market research, when you're trying to understand, again, some of the market dynamics, who are the competitors, what are their positioning, what are their products, you can use AI and feed it information about what you're offering and have it help do the comparisons to kind of recognize opportunities. So that's kind of low hanging fruit, is using a lot of stuff for AI to get a lot of things that you would have an assistant spend hours and days and weeks trying to pull that information. AI is really good at that because it has access to all that stuff. And as everybody's probably aware, it's not just discovering the information, finding it and regurgitating it, it's processing it and kind of making suggestions and stuff like that. So that's a big part of it too. So we use that as what we call like a co-pilot kind of thing. I think some of the other more effective ways, especially for marketing teams, is in using surveys and focus groups, and they serve a slightly different purpose. One is more quantitative and one is more qualitative. So you've got survey data that can be more quantitative. But if it's designed well, then that's going to give you answers to maybe the size of the market and the likelihood to prefer one thing versus another, a lot of rate this on a scale of 1 to 5 kind of things. And so you can get hundreds or thousands of responses. And then you can look at the statistical significance of that to see if it's valid. So that's a really good one. We pair that a lot with focus groups because focus groups is where you can, and interviews. So it's a really good way to get the story behind the decision. So asking questions about why people are making decisions they do, you can, a lot of times that's harder to predict what you're going to get out of that because you're not going to get like, well, 80% of people prefer this, but you're going to get like, yeah, I won't travel more than 10 minutes to see my doctor because of this, or this is really frustrating when I go shopping, or gosh, I really wish I could find this kind of like healthy food in this location. That's the kind of stuff you can get. You can understand like the why. So the market research is powered by AI. And also I think surveys and focus groups are big ones. And then obviously on the back end, obviously you have to have analytics in place, and you can make them even more and more sophisticated, but having some kind of reporting so you can see how things are working and do some testing experimentation. Those are probably the big categories that I think just about every brand in that size between $1 million and $500 million certainly should be doing as part of their kind of regular operations.
Okay. Let's see. So you have any examples? Do you want to talk through some specifics?
Yeah. Examples of things that we've done.
Yeah. I think that'd be good.
Yeah. There's a few that we've done here, and in previous lives, we've done a lot of research, but I think one example is with a startup that was called Lorient Boats. And this was, the idea was to create the very first electric bass boat, right? And so this is not an inexpensive product. It's a big purchase, but it was a relatively new market. So it was a lot of uncertainty and unknowns and risk. And so the founder wasn't, had a really good instincts and understanding of the market, but still, there's a lot of questions that he wasn't sure about. So like, what are the concerns? Are people concerned about range anxiety? Are they worried that like something will happen if the battery gets wet, like all that kind of stuff. So we did research to try to understand concerns, but also really rethinking the reason people go bass fishing, right? So most bass boats have 2 seats, and you think about it as like a dude that wants to like get away and be by himself for hours, right? But that's not necessarily the case because it's a lot of times it's like quality time with other people. So you take your son or your daughter or you go with your spouse. And so, we were trying to find out why is it seen as an isolated exercise? If people could take 4 people, does it make sense to have 4 seats in this thing? Because then you could go and you could take your wife, you could take your kids, you could make it more of a group thing, right? You could have 3 of your friends go. And so it was really validating those things and then understanding how to position the brand. So is this like a Yeti kind of like person, like a higher end that needs high quality products, it's more refined? Or is it a little bit more like a Patagonia where, people are really interested in the electric side because it's like saving the earth? And, or is it more, we're just about performance and power and we just need the fastest boat to get out there and win competition. So, so we did research to validate a lot of that. And it wasn't like a huge budget, but it was really helpful because it really drove a lot of the messaging and the decisions. Even the design of the boat was great because the research directly informed even little touches about the materials used and the colors and the controls and all that stuff. So it was neat to see that it wasn't just marketing and positioning, but it was actually the product itself that was really informed.
And that's kind of another point of how the market research impacts many areas downstream.
Yeah.
I mean, launching something new like that, obviously it's huge, but even with, maybe you could mention another example of like how when we do market research in an ongoing way, for another brand that we work with, and how it even changes our perception of what customers think and how we adapt our marketing content materials around that.
Yeah. So, one of our clients in healthcare, I don't know is that who you're referring to?
Good guess.
We did a lot of research up front because it's in primary care and it's a very, very crowded space. And we kind of stepped back then we're doing ongoing stuff now. But initially, what we were trying to understand was, are our assumptions about why people choose a doctor true?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's like they've been in business for a long time, but it's like, let's just make sure before we expand into all these new markets that our assumptions are true.
And give a little bit of a profile, because they are expanding currently into multiple markets, right?
Right.
So it's not just a local. It is local Atlanta, but it is bigger than the metro area and bigger than beyond that. So it does require a lot of research into new markets, right?
Yeah. So this was when they were going from, they'd kind of been in one market where they were really well known, and they were going to introduce themselves to these new markets that are in the Atlanta suburbs. And like most metropolitan areas, it's not a homogeneous market. Like Atlanta is made up of a lot of different communities, and they have different personalities, different demographics. And so we need to do a bunch of research to try to figure out what the main value proposition was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And initially we landed on quality, because everybody needs a quality doctor, right? You want someone that knows what they're doing. It's kind of important. But in our focus group studies, we started to dig a little bit deeper. And one of the really interesting insights that kind of drove a lot of their market positioning was, we asked people what their top 5, I think, the most important things about a doctor, and quality was always ranked high.
Mm-hmm.
So if we had just done a survey or taken that at face value, we would have just been like, okay, well then we need really high credentialed doctors. We need to prove really good outcomes for their primary care. But when we started asking them, what do you mean by quality? The answers were like, oh, a doctor that listens to me, and someone that cares about me, and someone that spends enough time with me when I go into the appointments. And we're like, technically not quality. And so we started realizing, like, they're describing a patient experience as being the most important thing. And so we kind of shifted the messaging a little bit and kind of bet the brand, so to speak, on the idea of creating this different patient experience. So it's almost like taking the Chick-fil-A and the Lexus, and we use all these other brands to be like, imagine we took all of these concepts and introduce them into healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And even in hospitality and food service, it's like a high-end restaurant has a host.
Yeah.
So that's a great experience. You walk in, normally you walk into a primary care doctor and you just don't know what to do. There's people at the front desk and it's like, I guess I sit down. Do I walk up to there? So they've got a host that kind of greets you. And so all of these new things that impacted, to your point, the business, not just the marketing, came out of some of that.
Yep.
On an ongoing basis, every time they go in a new market, like we've realized there's a market in the northeast corridor of Atlanta where culturally it's much different. There's like pockets of a lot of Asian families and different like demographics and cultures in there, and they're at a much higher concentration. And we found that they respond differently, unsurprisingly, to the messages that resonate with the other markets don't necessarily resonate with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have differences in like there's a lot more multi-generational households that are really, really high income up there. So we're realizing we need to take the value proposition and adjust it a little bit. And so we're doing ongoing research to do that through focus groups and surveys and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So do it initially, and then on an ongoing basis, make sure that you're maintaining the pulse, especially as you're growing. So, but even if they weren't, it would still be important because, cultural preferences change all the time anyway.
Yeah.
And so as people evolved and you got younger folks coming in and new customers, you just can't assume that they make decisions and care about the same stuff.
Yeah. That's really, I love that story from that client because, not every client will take that type of feedback from like their marketing team, like their outsourced marketing team, to say like, we found this is our suggestion. It's like a business change. It literally changed the model of how they were going to rebrand themselves, that now they have this whole patient experience is completely different. But kudos to them for taking the research and saying, okay, yeah, we really should do something about that.
Yeah.
And I love that when you can develop that trust with a client, and then you get the opportunity to impact other areas of the business that aren't just creating marketing material and content.
Yeah.
Because really that's not what the marketing material is a means to an end, right? And so they actually wanted to create the better patient experience. Yeah. So. Yeah.
That's a great point. They were open to that, and it did impact obviously a lot of their business. And they've been successful in it, but it continues to evolve over time in terms of what we do how they respond. So
yeah, I feel like most of the time nowadays it's like, you're right. I mean, like Chick-fil-A, they have tons of people that are going to talk to you. Most places, it's completely automated. You don't talk to anyone. And if there is someone there, they're behind glass. And it's like so impersonal, and you're already so nervous to be there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool to see kind of them go a different way, but also take the data and marry the two with some action. So it's very cool.
And also impacted, HR. So they no longer just need people who can, run an X-ray machine. They need someone who actually likes people and is nice and genuine. So it's all these things where, they wouldn't necessarily prioritize that, but if they believe that every interaction with a patient matters, and that's the brand, we could create messaging and put out really fancy advertising. But if they don't have that experience and consistency, then the story doesn't connect. It doesn't make any sense, and they're not going to go. So we did a lot of training with the staff, and even in their hiring, it was infused into all of that. So people have to understand there's a way to behave, there's a way to talk to people and care for patients that gives them the feeling that they matter, and that actually helps their healthcare, their perception of healthcare increase. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the tools that we would use and that you would recommend others use. I mean, if you want to touch on some of the process of integrating AI, you can do that as well. But what are some of those things?
Yeah, there's a ton of them. And so, I'm hesitant to mention them because they're changing so quickly. And there's a lot that we don't use that I'm not as familiar with, but categorically you're going to have online survey tools. And so we've used Qualtrics, we've used SurveyMonkey. There's a lot of emerging tools, but something like that, I mean, you can use Google Forms and stuff like that. So it's more about accessing and getting the right people. So getting a panel, as they call it, is the hardest thing for survey data. We typically break it up into existing customers and non-existing customers or potential customers because it gives you more information. So doing research like surveys with existing customers is a lot easier because typically you have access to their information. So if you've got 10,000 customers that you can include on an email or ask them, like, would you participate in a survey? And that's a great way to understand why they chose you in the first place, what they like about what you offer, what you can do differently, stuff like that, which is super valuable. But it also doesn't give you any information about the people that chose not to use you. So they either don't know about you or made a different decision. And so that's when finding a panel, we've done everything from like Facebook advertising to email solicitation to banner ads, to hiring a company to get those people. It's not easy, but once you can acquire those people, then that's really valuable information because you can ask them questions about what they chose and like who they use or who your competitors are. And then maybe even we often ask them like, what would it take for you to switch brands from who you're currently using? And that's really, really valuable. So that's going to be more expensive, but separating those two, so that's on the survey side. Focus groups, we usually don't use a lot of tools. You can do online focus groups. So we've done things with, Zoom calls and stuff like that. Those can be good. There's a lot of ways that you can do kind of quasi focus groups. We've used a tool called Vox Pop Me, which is a random name, but where you can actually prompt them with questions or content or media, and they take selfie videos of themselves responding or reacting to it. And so you can show that we've showed them ads before and they would be like, I didn't really understand it. Like, this was a little bit confusing to me. It seems like this. And so it is anecdotal. It's not really quantitative, but it's very interesting because those are customers they might be a customer for a local Atlanta place that's in Milwaukee. So they may never be customers, but especially on the creative side, it does give you some interesting insights in terms of how they're responding to things, and you see their reactions. They're telling the story about how they reacted.
Yeah, that's good.
So there's other tools like when you're getting into analytics, you've got obviously Google Analytics, and there's all kinds of tools to do that. There's Meltwater, and there's social listening tools to kind of track progress that way. There's A/B testing tools that you can do experimentation. So it's really all over the place. And so again, it's more just a matter of like figuring out. The most important thing is really understanding what the goals and objectives are. I know that sounds generic, but really you have to understand what you're trying to accomplish. Because then you know exactly what to do. And then even kind of nerdy, like write research questions, like a research question. So you know exactly what you're trying to answer, because you can start doing research and be like, let's just ask people stuff. And it just becomes cool. We have information, but like, how do we do anything about it?
Yeah.
So unless you're intentional with what the questions are and what your objectives are, you're not going to get as much out of it. And sometimes, especially if you're going to pay people to participate in a focus group, you might buy them lunch, you might pay for a place. It can be, $100, $200 a person, probably a bit more than that. So, so it can get real expensive really quickly.
Yeah. Do you want to talk at all about some of the secret sauce for using some AI for research, or?
Yeah, we can get into some of that. We've used it, so far primarily in a lot of the analysis side of things. And so you can take, transcripts and it can summarize, which is a great way to do it. That's kind of low hanging fruit. That's a good use of AI. We've also used it when we're doing independent research. So all of our clients, we do research on their market. We do research on their competitors, on their customers. And then we basically build an AI gem or GPT or something like that. So we call it basically a client hub. Yeah. So that it becomes an expert in their business. And so that's a really good thing to ask questions and things like that. Now, it's not original research, so you're not getting anything necessarily new, but it gives you a lot of background and context that you can kind of start with some new stuff. Yeah. There's AI built in a lot of the tools. So most of the survey tools, you can basically describe it and say, I want a survey that asks these questions, or they've got templates. So that's a good thing. It can suggest things. So it makes everything way more efficient. It's built into a lot of the tools. And so obviously you can use it to kind of learn, get some information, and you can also use it to optimize tools and then to help with the synthesis of information by just kind of feeding it data and stuff like that. Okay. So, and then on the analytics side, obviously the more data you feed it on your sales data, on your analytics data, the more valuable that becomes, because then it can make recommendations, because it can see all of the stuff you have. But that's usually for companies that have a lot of data and have access to all that stuff. They can kind of feed it. Yeah. So. Okay.
Cool. Was there anything else you want to talk about in relationship to market research before we wrap it up?
No, I think just to reiterate, I think, it can be hard to justify research, because you don't really know what you're going to find out. So you kind of have to build a culture that is curious. And in some cases, to be honest, it's like, the research is what helps you sell your ideas. Because sometimes you can't, if you look at what's successful in marketing, sometimes you can look objectively, but it's really hard to compare, because you don't know if what if we did this instead of doing A, if we did B, would it B have been better? Right. Yeah. You don't really know that. So sometimes the best marketing is when you follow the best process, right? So if it's a really smart, intelligent, well-defined, well-researched, justified process informed by data and research, then that's what's going to lead into a better result. So, okay. So I think that's going to be part of it, is just establishing a culture where you appreciate and understand that that's just going to be part of it. So have to build a little bit more time into the process a little bit so you can do that stuff, maybe a little bit more investment, and then be able to make decisions about which tools are going to use for which situation, and try to just use something for every campaign. Yeah. So
that's great. And being open. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on our podcast today.
You.
I hope people found this helpful. And so if you enjoyed this, go ahead, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Between Two Pixels.